The Speed Limit. Actually Science, Episode 1. Chapter 1. The Wrong Answer. Everyone has heard the rule: nothing can go faster than the speed of light. It is the most famous speed limit in physics, stated in popular science books and documentaries and casual conversation as though it requires no further justification. The standard explanation goes something like this. Einstein's special theory of relativity shows that the speed of light is an absolute limit. Mass increases as you approach it. Time slows down. The math doesn't work beyond it. All of this is true. None of it is an explanation. Saying that mass increases as you approach the speed of light is not explaining why the speed of light is a limit. It is describing the mechanism by which the limit enforces itself. The deeper question is, why does this happen at all? Why is there a universal speed limit in the first place? What is it actually a property of? The answer to those questions has nothing to do with light. Light is almost irrelevant here. The speed of light is not a rule about photons. It is a property of spacetime, the fabric of the universe itself. And light just happens to travel at that speed because photons have no mass. If photons had even a tiny amount of mass, they would travel slower. To understand why there is a speed limit at all, we need to start with energy. When you push an object, apply a force to it, give it a kick, you are adding kinetic energy to it. In everyday experience and at everyday speeds, that energy goes entirely into motion. Push a ball, it moves faster. This relationship holds perfectly well at low velocities. But as an object's speed approaches the speed of light, the relationship begins to break down. The extra energy you add stops going into speed. Instead, it goes into mass. This is what E equals mc squared actually describes in practice. Energy and mass are not different things. They are two forms of the same thing. Mass is concentrated energy. Energy under the right conditions becomes mass. As you push an object harder and harder toward the speed of light, the energy you pump in converts to mass rather than velocity. The object gets heavier. A heavier object requires more force to accelerate. More force requires more energy. That energy also converts to mass. The cycle compounds. This is why you need infinite energy to reach the speed of light with a massive object. Not a large but finite amount. Infinite. Because the mass you would have to accelerate also becomes infinite as the velocity approaches the limit. This has been measured. It is not theoretical. Chapter 2. What CERN confirms. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland is 27 kilometers in circumference. It uses thousands of superconducting magnets cooled to temperatures colder than outer space. It draws enough electrical power to run a small city. Its purpose is to accelerate protons to very high speeds and collide them. The protons inside the LHC reach 99.999991% of the speed of light. That last tiny gap, the 0.09% they never quite close, is where the physics becomes extraordinary. At that speed, a proton is not slightly heavier than it is at rest. The mass increase is not a rounding error or a small correction. A proton traveling at 99.99991% of the speed of light has 7,460 times the mass it has when it is sitting still, 7,460 times heavier. All the energy of that enormous machine, all the electricity drawn from the French and Swiss power grids, all the force of those superconducting magnets pushing for kilometers went into mass. Not into the remaining 0.09% of the speed of light, into mass. To close that gap entirely would require infinite energy. Not a very large amount. Infinite. This is not a theoretical prediction that has never been tested. It is a measurement that is made, in one form or another, every time the LHC runs. This is not an exotic phenomenon that only appears inside the world's most expensive physics machine. The old cathode ray tube televisions that were standard household technology until the 2000s worked by firing electrons at a phosphor screen. Those electrons were traveling at a meaningful fraction of the speed of light. Engineers designing those televisions had to account for the relativistic mass increase of the electrons to make the beam deflect correctly. If they had used classical physics, the picture would have been distorted. Radiation therapy machines that treat cancer use electrons accelerated to relativistic speeds. The calculations that determine where the beam goes and how much energy it deposits require relativistic corrections. Classical physics gives wrong answers. Medical PET scanners, the imaging technology that detects metabolic activity in the body, produce photons through electron-positron annihilation and detect them at relativistic energies. The detectors are designed around relativistic physics. The universe enforces this rule constantly, at scales from the subatomic to the cosmic, whether or not the people building the technology are thinking about Einstein. The speed limit is real. It is not a suggestion. Chapter 3. It is not about light. Here is the part that is most often misunderstood, even by people who have studied physics. The speed of light, 219,792,458 meters per second, is not fundamentally a property of light. It is a property of spacetime. Spacetime is the four-dimensional fabric that makes up the universe, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, unified by Einstein's general relativity into a single structure that can curve, stretch, and distort in the presence of mass and energy. This fabric has a characteristic speed. It is the maximum rate at which any information, any influence, any causal connection can propagate through it. This speed exists independently of light. If there were no photons anywhere in the universe, the speed limit would still be there. Light travels at this speed because photons are massless. A massless particle has no choice. It must travel at the spacetime speed limit because the equations that govern massless particles have only one solution for their velocity, and it is exactly this number. If photons had even a tiny amount of mass, they would travel slower than 290,79458 meters per second. We know this because physicists have set very precise upper limits on the photon mass through experiment, and it is either 0 or so close to 0 that no instrument has ever detected a deviation. Gravity waves, ripples in spacetime itself, also travel at exactly this speed. Not because they are related to light, but because they are disturbances in spacetime, and spacetime propagates at its own characteristic speed. Think of it this way. Spacetime is not empty nothing. It is a thing. It has properties, geometry, curvature, a characteristic speed at which disturbances propagate through it. That speed is what we measure when we measure the speed of light, because light is one of the things that propagates through spacetime at its maximum rate. The speed limit is not a rule that was imposed on the universe. It is a consequence of what the universe is made of. If you built a universe with different fundamental constants, the speed limit would be different. But within the universe we actually live in, with the space-time we actually have, this speed is fixed by the structure of reality itself. There is no workaround. There is no technology that approaches it. There is no theoretical loophole that gets a massive object to this speed without infinite energy. The mathematics closes every door. This is not a failure of human imagination or engineering. It is a property of the universe as fundamental as the fact that parallel lines do not meet on a flat surface. 299,792,458 meters per second. Massless things travel at it. Everything else is slower, and that is not going to change.